Hello, Yu-Gi-Oh players, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. So this weekend, I went to my Judgment of the Light sneak preview at my locals, and as always, I pulled the worst super in the set. Also, I pulled these two pieces of total junk, but whatever. Anyway, kidding aside, I had a great discussion this weekend at the sneak preview about ban lists and predictions. And I came to a few conclusions based on that discussion, and I'd like to share some of those ideas with you guys. And one of the biggest ideas that came up with that, which is kind of the basis for what I'm making this video on, is that there are really two kinds of people who make ban list predictions. There are the people who make ban list predictions and have no idea what they're talking about when they're making a ban list prediction. And then there are the people who make ban list predictions, have no idea what they're talking about, but they act like they know what they're talking about, or they think they know what they're talking about. And what comes up out of these is a set of usually kind of contradictory, opposite ends, myths and mistakes. A lot of the time, a player who really doesn't know what they're talking about going into a ban list, has very little experience making ban list discussions, or whatever, will make big mistakes that they then realize when the format comes out that they were totally wrong on, and then totally overcompensate when they come to the other side of the spectrum and develop these weird myths about things that are based in the mistakes that they made before. And they always end up on like opposite ends of the same spectrum of wrongness. So a lot of these myths and mistakes in this video, which is, by the way, top 5 myths and mistakes about the ban list, like my last video of a similar nature. A lot of these myths and mistakes are going to sound contradictory, but really that's because they are both on opposite sides of a spectrum that you really need to be right in the middle of in order to be making really good decisions about the ban list predictions. So the first item on the list, our first mistake, is basing the ban list predictions that you make on the TCG meta. Now, this would seem like a good idea since a lot of the formats seem to hit the TCG meta significantly or affect the TCG meta significantly. It's not really a good idea because in all reality, Konami builds the ban list off of the OCG meta. And there are a couple of pretty glaring examples of this. There are a lot of subtle examples, individual cards that they hit that might not be as much of a problem in the TCG as they are on the OCG, or hitting a deck a little bit more in the ban list than it would make sense to in the TCG, or whatever. These are usually subtle examples of how the Konami builds their ban list off of the OCG meta. But a couple of more glaring examples happened in March, or not in March, but in 2012. One of them happened in March. The first one, the March 2012 one, was when they hit TG Agents, which wasn't doing anything in the TCG. I mean, TG Stun had a really good YCS once that a guy just kind of won because he had TG Stun. I don't remember how that worked, but it had TGs had a thing in the TCG, but really TG Agents had nothing to do with the TCG. The TCG didn't really see TG Agents at all, but the OCG had a big problem with them. And this is also similar to the September format of 2012 when they hit Hirata-Gishki very hard, when Hirata-Gishki had been doing very little to nothing in the TCG. So those are some glaring examples of a very common thing where Konami bases their ban list in the OCG, which leads us to our second item, the myth on the other side of that spectrum, which is the myth that Konami only makes their ban list base in the OCG, which is also patently untrue. One of the ways that they do include the TCG in their ban list is when they consider the future of the TCG when deciding whether they're going to hit something or not. Because frequently cards come out in Japan, they almost always do, before they come out in the TCG. So if a set of cards comes out before a ban list in Japan, but hasn't come out in the TCG, or has just barely come out in the TCG, even if it's a big problem in Japan, they're often not going to hit it. This is most frequently done in the March formats, but you also sometimes see it in September. I think you're going to see an example of this when when the ban list comes out, and I don't think that we're going to see Fire Fist get hit at all, because while it is something that's happening in the OCG and was a problem in the OCG already. I think that the future of Fire Fist in the TCG is so profitable for Konami that they're not going to hit it in the ban list. That's just my opinion. Once again, just I happen to fall into that spectrum of people who think that they know what they're talking about when they make a ban list prediction. Um, but moving on, the next mistake that people make on this end of the spectrum when they're making a ban list prediction is basing their ban list in a balanced format. And that's just something that I don't know how you can do that after like one ban list, because I think one of the ways that you can tell that you're doing that is when you try to justify a hit that you make on your ban list prediction, you use the phrase "too powerful" kind of pretty often. If you find yourself saying this is too powerful, too good, it's really broken, oftentimes it's a subjective idea of what would make a balanced format, and that's not how Konami operates. You see this once again in a lot of March formats that while there are ways that they could balance the format, they don't, because it doesn't make sense to if those hits will affect profits in the TCG. Um, so that's a big mistake that people make, is basing their decisions on a balanced strictly on a balanced format. Now that once again leads to another myth, which is the weirdo prevailing myth that Konami always makes the dick move. That they always intentionally make a format imbalanced because they're always going to make profit off of an imbalanced format. And a lot of people are saying it's true of this format, that they're going to avoid hitting Prophecy and Dragons because they don't want to stop making profit off of them. And while on the surface that seems true, because Konami often makes profitable decisions, because, well, they're a business. While they often make decisions that are profitable to them, they have to consider the future meta. And this is something that you see in September formats a lot. Konami really considers the future of the meta and the future of their profits, not just their current profits, when they're making a September format. Every year at September, they like to wipe the slate clean. Why? Well, because if they didn't, they'd have to vamp up power constantly to an almost infinite level, where power creep will just totally wreck the game. I mean, it's a problem already, but the game will just become unplayable if they just keep making unbalanced formats based in current profit. It's just it isn't true, and you can see that because if you look at September formats in the past, take last year when they wiped out Chaos Dragons, Dino Rabbit, and Zectors. Hieratic Gishki got hit pretty hard. They hit windups a little bit because they didn't see how good windups were yet. Pretty much nobody saw how amazing windups were until after the format changed. But they pretty much wiped the slate clean as far as the ban list goes. And you saw that in the September. The other example I'm thinking of is the September after Extreme Victory, when they hit Librarian, Formula, Fishborg, Shigen, Smoke Signal, Mindmaster, all of these things that were big problems that were still profitable for Konami, but were such big problems for their future income that it made sense to completely balance the format again, or almost completely balance the format again, before they could move on with making other decks. So that's a really big myth that's really prevalent, and I think it's really damaging to people's predictions, because they've got this weird cynical view of Konami that they hate the TCG, they're always going to make the worst decision for the TCG because it's always profitable to do that. And it really, in the long run, is not always profitable to focus on what's making you a lot of money now. My cat is being extremely cute right now, and he's very distracting. Anyway, so my final myth, the worst one of them all, I suppose I should have called this the number one myth, and for some reason this is still prevalent, is the myth that banless predictions are to be taken as anything more than speculation. And to a degree, this is an okay myth. There's an extent to which this is a good one to pay attention to. Because, if Prophecy and Mono Dragons are a big deal, they're really big decks, they are the big decks, it makes sense that you might want to trade them off while they're still big before the format hits, before they get hit on the ban list, because it's highly likely that they're going to do that. But a lot of people start making other kinds of decisions other than, maybe it's a good this is a good time to get rid of my prophecy or dragon deck, in speculations on the ban list. And this is where you see issues. This is why this week First Ed Ulti glow up bulbs hit $40, is because people are speculating, oh, glow up bulb's going to come back, I better buy them all out. And people are buying glow up bulbs for $40 based on a couple of predictions that people have made that glow up bulb is going to come back. And this is just a bad idea. And to summarize kind of my idea of just why ban lists, why people look at ban lists and use them for the wrong reasons, I'm going to quote my friend Nick, who said that discussing ban lists is a little bit like discussing religion. Nobody's ever going to change their mind about it. It's entirely speculation, and nobody is going to find out if you're right or not until it's too late. And that's totally true for ban list predictions. You can't make decisions on whether you want to get rid of or trade for or acquire individual cards based on a couple of predictions that some people made on YouTube or whatever, because almost always those people are wrong. I'm almost always wrong about these things, and I spend days analyzing the OCG and future sets and stuff like that, and I'm almost always wrong on a bunch of things. So really, no matter how prepared or knowledgeable you think a person is, or you think you are when it comes to ban list predictions, you can't make investments in the game based on individual hits on a ban list. Ban lists are a little bit like that thing that they say at the end of lottery commercials, where they're like, lotteries are based on chance and should be played for entertainment only, non-investment purposes. That's kind of what ban lists predictions are for. They're fun speculation. You can argue with people. You can show off your knowledge of the TCG and the OCG and the meta and whatever, but in the end, it's really just speculation. So thank you guys for watching my top 5 myths and mistakes about ban lists. I have to restart my computer again, but I will do my usual outro, which is if you liked the video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why, and then hit the subscribe button for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. I'm your host, the RJB0. Thank you for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I got a jet. See ya, guys.